I think we were at the KubeCon conference in Valencia and talking to folks, and like, we could help them out this open source project. And I was like, we could do this for tons of open source projects, and it solves like three problems at once for us.
Hi everyone, you're listening to Scaling DevTools, the show that investigates how DevTools go from 0 to 1. I'm joined today by Josh Thurman, who is the founder of Uffizzi, which is a preview environment for pull requests company. And I'm really excited today because Josh is doing some very interesting stuff that I've not seen anyone else do. Thanks so much for joining, Josh.
Yeah, thanks, Jack. I appreciate you having me on.
Could you tell us a bit about Uffizzi and about yourself?
Yeah, for sure. So Uffizzi is broadly in the environments as a service category. And so we're in the business of preview environments or ephemeral environments. Those terms are effectively used synonymously, but the ability to rapidly create a test environment for your full stack in response to a pull request, to test there, iterate there, and then to completely take that away, hence the ephemeral nature of it, right? It's short-lived. And so the problem we're solving is that the whole software community is using shared environments. That creates a host of problems, which we can probably dive more into. But we solve those problems with these short-lived environments, helping developers, QA, even product folks be able to rapidly test, rapidly iterate, and also not have to deal with a lot of the management headaches of environments that tend to happen over time. So that's what we do, and I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, it's a really cool problem that you're digging into, because I remember the first time we had preview environments at one of the companies I worked at, and it's just such a game changer in terms of like making it so much easier for everyone to test it and try it out. And yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, a lot of the, what indicated for us, like there was a market here is just end up having hundreds of conversations and like gleaning a lot of insights in the space. And, some of the worst things I've seen that teams have to do is this one team had they literally had a sign up sheet. Like it was like an online sign up sheet. It's like, hey, when can I use like the quote unquote dev environment? And like you have to block off the time. And so you have like that's like the worst I've seen. Is like it's truly contested and like to the point where they're actually like physically coordinating when people can use that. Other issues are, I've seen developers who they're like kind of afraid to merge because they're like afraid they might break the environment or put a bug in there, and they'll get on a Zoom call and like do kind of a peer review, with that person to make sure it's all good, right? And so, and that's, and I do recommend pair programming. That's good to go, but like that's not a great solution for the problem that they're trying to solve. Other things, you see people VPN into other people's machines to try to check issues, and so that combined with, on larger organizations, you have kind of capacity issues, right? Capacity planning. You get into the enterprise and it's like, well, how many environments do we need? And they have sort of mushroom farms of environments that have been created. They were used like once and they keep running because no one told the DevOps guy to like tear it back down, right? And so environments as a service or ephemeral environments help with that problem too. And so, bigger picture, it's like, hey, what are the kind of existential problems we're trying to solve? Is I think everyone's trying to do more with less these days, right? We're kind of in this weird economic situation where inflation's been high, interest rates are up, not really a full-blown recession, but you've seen a lot of layoffs. So on the enterprise side, everyone's trying to get more agile and leaner, right? And so having the ability to have as many environments as you need when you need them and only for as long as you need them is really helpful. It reduces your reliance on your DevOps folks who, they've got higher level issues they need problems to solve. And you also sort of empower your developers by giving them environments what they need. Like you shouldn't have to wait, right? It's like, it's silly to be like, oh, well, we have this code freeze, or like even like this sort of fear that like, well, this sprint's kind of done and we don't want to mess it up. So like, let's not push this thing even though it's ready, because I'm like, I'm afraid to like commit it to my QA environment. And then like, I don't know, I may delay my release, right? And of course, certainly at the enterprise level, delayed releases they cost millions, right? I mean, at that kind of scale, like of missed revenue opportunities. So I just kind of went deep on the enterprise side. On the startup side, they have another existential problem is like, hey, I'm trying to get to my seed round or my Series A or my Series B. And like, am I going to have enough time to do that? And like, I've got to move faster. What can I do to get a competitive advantage? To get the proof I need to get to the next round. Of course, the VC market has tightened up like considerably like in the last year. And so I think, certainly like I go back to when we were starting out, like I'll do anything for a competitive advantage. Like I'm an athlete and like I do triathlons and like I'm a sucker for anything. If I think something will give me like a 3% advantage or 1%, like I'll do it. Right. It's like, so if someone brings a tool to me and it's like, hey, 20, 30, 40% improvements in release frequency, development velocity, like I will try that. Of course I'll try that. Like it's a competitive market out here. Like why wouldn't we do that? So we're helping teams have those kind of numbers and that's exciting for us.
Yeah, that's actually a really interesting point there that you've kind of touched on. And I guess like as a triathlete, your time is the kind of principal thing that you're caring about.
Right.
And then is it like, when you're thinking about like release speeds and you can improve release speeds by 20%, like who are you consciously going after people that kind of really care about release speed as their like, their equivalent of a triathlon finishing time?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think, you really can't find a team that is going to say they don't care about release frequency or development velocity. Where it gets challenged is most teams are simply not measuring those types of things. So then it becomes like, well, if I can't measure it, like how am I even going to know, right? But Google had put out the DORA metrics. I think a lot of teams are doing that, which is the key metric there is release frequency as a measurement. But there's other things you can measure. I mean, number of merges per engineer over a period of time is a really good one. And then like, hey, what are the total number of issues like you can push through, in any given time? And like the KPIs with these tend to be like lead time, cycle time, and like code stability, right? And different teams measure those in different ways. But I do think, release frequency or the for startups, it's about release frequency. Like, we release like pretty much every day. And, we used to not do that, frankly. So before we had our product, before we could use our own product, we had this traditional sort of, QA. That was sort of the unstable environment. Then we had a staging that was more stable. And like we were releasing once a week. And eventually, once we could use our own product, like we now release every day. And we got rid of both the static environments. We just use our temporary environments and it's super fast, right? It's like the way I think about it is everything's a hot fix and like it's okay in a startup because like, you're trying to move fast and like it's your users still will accept like bugs that pop in, like, and you can fix those fast too. So it's like your time to recovery is not such a big issue. And then, but I'm talking about two sides because frankly, we have both customers. And so I think most people would tell you like, you need to pick one. And I generally believe that's true as a startup founder, except that we have both types of customers, both have found value in this. And so I'm now kind of more like, well, I'm going to try to just prove that fact. but like on the enterprise side, like I'll use, so Spotify's Backstage team uses Uffizzi. We're spinning up 400 ephemeral environments for them a month. There's about 200 engineers who've used our service. And, Backstage is huge, right? It's like 20,000 stars on GitHub, but it has 1 million end users, like 500 enterprises are using it. So those maintainers are under a tremendous amount of pressure to pack more features into every release. So they have a scheduled release cycle. So they do like kind of like a beta release. They call it a next release every week, but their official releases go out once a month. It's like a Tuesday in the middle of the month, right? And so they're trying to get more issues packed into every release, that's a different way of maybe looking at it. It's not, the release frequency is set, but they're actually releasing more issues per release. And that matters to them, especially matters. So like, I don't know what Spotify's plan was, but they open sourced about 3 years ago, and it's gone so well. And maybe they planned this all along, I don't know, but they're now monetizing. They basically sell subscription plugins to everyone who's using it. So like it's become a strategic project for them, and so obviously they care a lot about that. So going faster is something that when I talked to like Ben Lambert's one of the senior engineers there, and who we worked with to help basically implement the Uffizzi solution for them, and you can just get the sense that there's a tremendous amount of pressure on them to just the volume. They're getting hundreds of contributions every month. So the core team, I think it's around 50 folks from Spotify, but there's about 1,000 total contributors all time. But like in any given month, there's like 150, 200 contributors, right? Opening pull requests. They're filtering through 400 pull requests a month. So that kind of volume, anything that saves them just a little bit of time, basically faster PR reviews. When there are issues, it's a faster feedback loop because we're both talking about the same environment. Like, hey, I looked at this, it's not quite right. Can you fix it? The person pushes to fix it. It's in the environment that's already sitting there with the pull request. Yep, it's good to go. And now that thing gets merged faster than the alternative, which is, hey, either I'm like merging to a shared environment, testing it there, or I'm like pulling it on my local machine. And again, competitive advantage is everything. It's like, I would much rather have an environment that's there for this purpose right here in front of me than having to like go do some manual work to test the thing that needs to be tested.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes sense. It makes sense. And actually, like, that's a good segue onto Spotify Backstage and like open source in general.
Yeah.
And I think something that's super interesting about how you've been doing go-to-market is you mentioned to me that you've been going specifically after these big open source projects and like helping them use Uffizzi as a way to get customers.
Yeah.
And I've not seen many other companies do this, especially at the early stage.
Yeah. So, the way I look at it, like pretty much any startup has, one, you've got to get your beta community going. And that's really hard because your product's really not quite there. And, engineers are skeptical, right, of like trying anything that's not, they know it's not quite ready. So you're trying to build a beta community because you need the feedback to make the product good enough that you can go kind of mass market. But you also need, you need credibility. Like, who's using this? Well, no one at first, right? And then you also need visibility. Like, no one knows about you. And so, gosh, I think we were at the KubeCon conference in Valencia and talking to folks, and we started talking to the Backstage folks, and we're like, we could help them out, this open source project. And it's like, we could do this for tons of open source projects. And it solves like 3 problems at once for us. And so so that's what we started doing, and doing it very deliberately as really our go-to-market. And it absolutely has helped with those things. So, gosh, at first it was like really painful because, we had our own beta customers, of course, but like, there's all types of applications out there. And our solution, you define your app in Docker Compose, and like that's quite popular, but like how everyone's using it, like there's slight variabilities to it. And so, the first like handful out the gate, like we couldn't technically meet the needs of the project. And that was really like, it's frustrating because you think you're there and you're like, hey, we're not there, guys. So then we fixed the product to be more useful and more broadly useful. And once we did that, then we get more open source projects. And as we get more projects, like, I think it's fair to say that like the open source, these maintainers, they're the leaders in the industry, right? Like they're out there working transparently, and they're doing things, they're frankly the most advanced methods and kind of the best practices, right, that the rest of the dev community follows. So it's really helpful to have like that level of credibility, giving us that feedback, and also validating us, saying, hey, this is a great product, like, and obviously they're using it now and getting a lot of benefit out of it. So I as a founder, that's one of the best, signs you can get is like, hey, this is a really smart person or folks, and they think the product is valuable. That's a really good sign to me that we're on to something here. And obviously, I mentioned the visibility piece. Like, it's all in the open. All the implementations are out there. Like, we talked, we're talking about how engineers are naturally skeptical, and they should be. But you can go look at all these repos and see, hey, this is exactly how it's set up. This is how it's integrated with GitHub Actions. This is the file that's being used to define the application for every ephemeral environment. And so like it's been good for us. I'm glad we did it. And when you can say, you're supporting, I like that we're supporting a lot of, I call them usurpers. So like, I'm familiar with Melissearch, like it's awesome, like search tool, like built in Rust. It's like lightning fast. Like, Elasticsearch has been like the player for a pretty good while now. Like Melissearch is coming in and just crushing it, with a really great tool. And we talked to those maintainers. They're like, yeah, we'd love to have, ephemeral environments. And that's it's a CLI tool. We basically spin up their server, and they run tests through a web terminal, which is just sort of one of the many use cases for Uffizzi. But you've got them. You've got we support NoCoDB, who is basically a open source Airtable alternative, and they're crushing it. And they think this is great. And then one of our customers, Tild, is like trying to take a little bit of the Stripe market on monetizing payments. So like supporting a new generation of builders is really exciting for us. And, I think when people say like, now that these folks have ephemeral environments, they're not going back. Like if you were to take it away, they'd be like, what? Like, and I think, we talked to some people who are like, yeah, I had it in my old company. I'd love to have it here. Because I think people do recognize the benefits associated with them.
Yeah, I think you're right. And it is something that is hard to go back from. How did you kind of land on this space and kind of landing on something that is so important to people?
Yeah, so I would say through like gross failure, and just so I'll go back. So I was a Navy SEAL most of my adult life, and exited the military like late 2018. Wanted to be an entrepreneur, wanted to be in the tech space. So partnered up with my co-founder. We were kind of doing some like private cloud contracting stuff. And we're like, hey, we want to really, launch something, that helps developers out. So we set off on this dubious task of we're like, hey, let's build a Heroku competitor. We were like, hey, Heroku hasn't been improved in so long. Like, it's super expensive. The user experience isn't that great compared to what it could be. And so we built that thing and we launched that thing. And, as first-time founders, like not knowing a lot of things, the market was like, it was saturated. And like, even though our product was quite good and people liked it, we could not remotely compete with the scale or the economies of scale that like not only Heroku, but DigitalOcean like launched an app platform too, like literally the same time. And so that was, frankly, it was dumb. Like, we shouldn't have done that. Like, I can say that now, like, we didn't have, the product wasn't so much better that we were going to like, usurp Heroku or like even like take up a huge market niche. So, we kind of had some like dark times realizing that. This is like mid 2021. And, we had some money, we had a team, we had like, our software was capable, and we used our network to be like, hey, maybe there's other people, or you could repackage this in a useful way. And basically people were saying like, hey, my developers need to spin up environments all the time. Like, I don't want to host on your platform, but I would love to have a temporary testing environment. And so that basically set us on this path. And we really had the nexus of the idea. We really had to do a lot of product work to transition out of that, but the core was kind of there. And so we just kept iterating obviously on it. And then I know I'm going a little deep here, but we got a lot of feedback that people wanted like a really tight integrations with GitHub Actions. So we publish a reusable workflow so people, the big thing is like a lot of people put a lot of time in their builds, they're customized. And so a general build solution might not be, or it doesn't fit for a lot of folks, particularly kind of like more advanced teams. And so And I go back to like the Spotify situation. They had tried another solution, another third-party solution, but the build was proprietary. I say proprietary. It wasn't accessible. It was on like the company's infrastructure. So we plug directly into GitHub Actions. So they have complete control and visibility. We're just a step in a process they've already set up. So we failed in our first startup. We pivoted out of that, and then fortunately we had enough left, if you will, in the tank, both mentally, emotionally, and resource wise.
Yeah,
which is a whole other level to it to keep going, and find like a niche that really needed to be filled, and provide value to folks.
Yeah, I think that's it often doesn't start out right as like the one, because you kind of have to start somewhere, and unless you have like this idea you're just pulled to because everyone needs it.
Yeah.
It's like often in a way that's the best way to do it. Oh, I don't know if it's the best way, but like a lot of people do it, right? Where it's like you start building something and like people are like, it's okay. And then, but they're like, but yeah, I really want this other thing.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, okay, yeah, as you said, it's like if you've got enough left in the tank on all fronts to actually go after it, there's often the best way.
I think there's a lot of startup stories that are kind of like that. You have kind of the right, you're moving in the right direction, but it's not quite right. And it's that critical, like early feedback, and being willing to like having the humility to take that, I think is really important, because it's really easy to get emotionally attached to your idea, right? It's like, hey, this is your idea. This is your baby. And, it can be pretty easy to like reject feedback that they don't like to hear. Right. Like we, in the, so I mentioned that I was a SEAL. And so like one of the things we would say is like, you'd be planning an operation, right? And, you're like, oh, this is going to be this. I got this perfect plan. I've been working on it. And like someone walks up who like they just haven't been there, haven't been doing the work. And they're like, oh, why don't you just do this? And like, it's obviously better. And then be like, no, like I want to defend my idea. Right. But it's like, we call it like, don't be a bitch to your emotions. It's like, you have to be like, shit. Yes. I just spent like a day on this plan, but you're right. Like you walked up and saw, like you had a different perspective, and you're like, you're right, and I'm wrong. And I have to like own that and like, and do that. But if you want to have a high performing organization, you have to operate like that. You've got to like, you can't get your feelings hurt over when there's obviously like better plans out there or ways to do things.
Yeah. And I guess maybe it's like more about like what you and your co-founder built in terms of like how you work together and kind of what you'd learned and kind of being nimble. And probably that was the valuable part of what you did in that time, and probably will still be, right?
Yeah,
like,
for sure.
Uffizzi is like, right now, like this is the area, but like there might be like things that you kind of opportunities that come up, or like,
yeah, for sure. Like, we try to stay malleable. I mean, like we can't find anyone who thinks that the concept of ephemeral environments is like not like really not valuable. I mean, it comes down to, so we ran a survey at the end of the year, last year, like a preview environments, to put out a report on like the state of preview environments. And we were fortunate to have, I don't know if you know the Open Source Initiative, but it's a nonprofit that basically like outlines a lot of the guidance around like what is open source and the licensing and that type of thing. And they sort of corral all that. But anyways, there's some really good folks over there. They helped us on the survey basically so we could get a good audience to give us feedback. But like 80% of the respondents said that they think preview or ephemeral environments are valuable. Where it gets tricky is it's a hard problem because of so much. Everything's dynamic, right? It's like, hey, every new environment, it's like, okay, new networking, new URL. What about my data? Like, how am I going to log in? Like, these are hard problems that have frankly prevented a lot of people from like moving to ephemeral. Like, it's not that people don't think it's valuable. It's the friction of like transitioning. And of course that we're coming in to help try to lower the friction, down to a level where it's not too difficult for teams to onboard and get rolling.
Yeah, and actually, like on that, like it's one of those things where I feel like everyone, if you're not doing it, you should be doing it. But how do you create that kind of like now, like because it seems like it's one of those things that's easy to just be like, yeah, we know we should do this, but like we're really busy, not right now.
Yeah. For sure. Like you're touching on something that I think is, it's like, we're moving along, we're getting along. We have a test environment. Like it's good. Like how do you get to the pain point? I think it does come down to like, the teams who are really kind of like the most aggressive. Like, and I say that because there's a lot of, again, these open source projects are like, they're trying to like kind of like take down or like take over a market that's frankly like already established. And they're like, yeah, I'll do anything for like a competitive advantage to help me out here. And then you like, I go back to like the Backstage thing. It's like, there's really like a huge pressure cooker on those folks to release. I mean, again, like Netflix, American Airlines, like Siemens, like all these big companies use that. And they, of course, they're like, hey, we want this all to get better. The spotlight is all on this team to make that happen. Right. And so I think it's when those kind of existential pressures come in, particularly if teams have like, unfortunately had to do with layoffs too, like, that CTO, the VP of engineering, whoever it is going to be expected to continue to produce, even though they have, frankly, like less resources like available to them.
Mm. So it sounds kind of like you're tying the challenges that they're having, like the real challenges around, as you said, I think in the beginning, like doing more with less. And
yeah. I think that's sort of like the existential pressure, right? Of like improving, and then like there's kind of like daily reminders of, I'm sitting around like, or my engineers are sitting around like unable to test something because they don't have an environment available to them, right? Mm-hmm. And like it's 2023, like that shouldn't be the case, right? Like, but I think teams are still really, really struggling with this.
Yeah, that's a good point. That is I think it's something that is probably has a lot of potential to really like stir up emotions with people, and like I think it's something like Retool have done really well. I don't know if you've seen Retool, but like when you go to their homepage, it's like stop. I can't remember the exact wording, but it's all like stop faffing around with like different like data and wrangling stuff and doing annoying like tables. And they really like play on this emotion and like,
yes,
that struggle. And it seems like you probably have a lot of potential there to.
Yeah. I mean, we
engineers sitting around not doing anything.
For sure. Well, you should always be like empowering your people, investing in your people, right? That's like, I go back to like my, in special forces, like one of the core tenets is like, hey, people over hardware, right? Of course, that translates to like, well, I think the Agile Manifesto says the same thing, but it's, if you're not giving your people the tools they need, like you're not actualizing your potential, right? Like, and so I think there's a lot of room for improvements, performance improvements, like, again, going back to like, how you measure those of release frequency, development velocity, but there's a lot of room there when you give the people give them the tools they need, right? Give them their environments, like make it easy. Don't have these like sort of hurdles or roadblocks that are going to be dragging your organization down.
Yeah, definitely. Josh, I think that's all we've got time for.
Okay.
We've started doing a TLDR, and what would be your kind of key takeaways for other DevTool founders to take away from this conversation?
Yeah, so I would say like don't be afraid to approach the open source community if you've got a new tool that can help them out. It's they really are quite approachable, and they all work on GitHub, and you can reach them there. So don't be afraid to reach out. And again, like, don't do it as like a spammy thing. Do it as a, hey, I'm going to provide value to your project, and like do the work, like, do the work for them. It's not like, hey, I'm going to throw this thing and like you can think about using it. I'm a big believer in, you've got to provide value really before you can like extract value. And so don't be afraid to do things that don't scale early to get the things you need to scale. So that would probably be my biggest takeaway for other kind of founders and folks trying to scale dev tools.
Yeah, that's a really, really awesome insight. And where can people learn more about yourself and about Uffizzi?
Yeah, please just come to our homepage, uffizzi.com. We've got our case studies on there where you can kind of dig deep, and then also you can find the open source projects we're supporting, where of course you can just go to those repos and see there's a Uffizzi environment for every pull request running on those, and you can see how it's set up.
Amazing. Thanks so much for joining, Josh, and thanks everyone for listening.
Yeah, thank you, Jack. I really appreciate you having me.